video game!
I read this article on The Gamer written by the Tonberry Eater. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth shouldn't exist. So I'm seeing this article and I'm like, was there some development, like chaos that they got through? No, it's just this guy complaining. January is a boring time to be a gamer. The big games for 2025 aren't out yet, and the big games for 2024 are all old news. So last month I found myself returning to older games. The same impulse took me back to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I started the game at launch, so it's been installed on my PS5 for nearly a year at this point. My console clock says I have 30 hours in, and judging by the level list, I'm about 2/3 of the way through. Not at 30 hours. You are not 2/3 of the way through. No way. By any metric, I've put a good amount of time into this game. And yet, when I think back over my dozens of hours with it, it feels like nothing has happened. Serenity now, serenity now. When I look ahead, there's little pulling me forward. That's probably why it's taken me a year to finish it. Alright, listen, at this point, why keep playing it then? If there's nothing pulling you forward, you feel like nothing's happened, why are you going to finish it unless you're hoping whatever feeling you've had through your 30 hours you think is going to change? Honestly, after 30 hours, if I'm bored with a game, I probably wouldn't make it to 30 hours to begin with, but I wouldn't continue on. This game is the awkward middle chapter that often plagues trilogies. Oh, really? Did Empire Strikes Back plague a trilogy? Did Two Towers plague a trilogy? The game is the awkward middle chapter that often plagues trilogies, and in an effort to stretch the story of one game out over the course of 3. If he thinks that this game is made to stretch the story out over 3, he's not played the original Final Fantasy VII. This is beat for beat the original Final Fantasy VII. If you're going to come up with that description of Rebirth, you don't have knowledge of the source material here. Back to the Future 2 is badass. That's a good point. That's the middle movie, huh? Rebirth barely stretches the end of Disc 1. But no, we're stretching things out. We're stretching things out here. Rebirth seems to have ended up as a big bowl of nothing. And yet, it also is absolutely packed with stuff. There are tons of locations to visit, ton of minigames to play, tons of side quests to pursue, collectibles to track down, and hidden areas to check off your map. But none of those tons can replace its missing narrative urgency. Again, this is just a lack, it's an ignorance of the source material, or not understanding their narrative urgency of the game. Final Fantasy VII Remake didn't suffer from this problem. That game felt like it was all building up to something. This was largely due to Square Enix limiting its scope to the Midgar section of the original FF7. There was a built-in endpoint the moment when Cloud and company would escape the city with Shinra hot on the trail. You talk about a built-in endpoint, you didn't know. If this was your first time playing the game, you didn't know that's the endpoint of the game. You didn't know, hey, we just got to get out of Midgar. Like, that was never a goal. But you're telling me that Rebirth doesn't have a built-in endpoint? Like, are you kidding me with the endpoint of Rebirth? But again, he hasn't finished the game, so he's speaking on this prematurely. How's outer space? Dark as F, but the sun is out there. There was a built-in goal too. He's still talking about Remake here. As the game focused on the gang's eco-terrorism as they blew up reactors and waged war against Shinra. And it had a big climactic moment that could set the story towards its inevitable conclusion with the plate dropping on the Sector 7 slums. Add in the looming threat of Sephiroth, the mystery of the Whispers, and questions about Cloud's past, and it was one intriguing hook after another pulling you along through the game. Again, that's the source material. And so is Rebirth. This is the middle section of the game of Final Fantasy VII. The party has left Midgar because they realize the true threat is not Shinra, it's Sephiroth. So they are trying to track Sephiroth down to stop him, and they are following his path. So all these adventures they come into on the way, their goal is to find Sephiroth. It was helped by its more strictly linear structure too. You could stop and smell the Mako, but the game was ever funneling you along. Minigames were just a fun diversion, but in Rebirth, minigames feel just as important as the story. In the case of the Queen's Blood tournament, a minigame becomes the story as everything slows to a halt so you can play cards on a cruise ship. I keep seeing this complaint from people. Do they not pay attention when the game tells you if you don't want to play this, you can go forfeit now, and you can skip the entire Queen's Blood tournament? These people, they don't pay attention. They're probably skipping through the dialogue, skipping through the menus, and then they don't realize that this they're complaining about being forced to do, they're not being forced to do it. Game journalists just get clicks by making rage bait articles. I think that's what this is, Six, and I'm going to give you my reason why. Don't let me forget. So I enjoyed that chapter in isolation. So now he says he enjoys the cruise ship chapter. Like, let's look at this here, because adding the Queen's Blood tournament to the cruise ship, which you could have skipped, by the way. The original cruise ship trek from Junon to Costa del Sol in the original Final Fantasy VII was just a couple brief conversations and a fight with Jenova. And it was a cargo ship. They made this interesting. They made this ship a big deal. And it got a lot of character development at the beginning with Tifa and Aerith's conversation. Down below, we got some good comedic moments with Red and Barrett trying to get on the ship. And it all built up like it was a fun cruise ship. You see all the people on the ship. All the kids, the families. So now there's a threat when Jenova's actually on the ship. When the monsters board the ship, there's real people that are threatened here. Not just like a skeleton crew of the crew. The cruise ship guys. So like the whole thing building up this entire cruise ship makes Jenova and the monsters more of a threat. I enjoyed that chapter in isolation, but it and the Gold Saucer section contributed to the feeling that the game is just taking its time en route to nowhere important. Again, it's following the same path as the original game. In the original game, you go to the Gold Saucer and you can play all these mini games if you want. The story development at the Gold Saucer, it leads to the whole Barrett in the prison deal. That all comes from the Gold Saucer. The second visit to the Gold Saucer, if he's even been there yet, is the whole Aerith song and building up what's going to happen to Aerith. So I don't know how you think that it contributes to the feeling that the game is just taking its time to go nowhere when you get the whole backstory of Barrett and leading to the whole Barrett and Dyne stuff because of what Dyne does at the Gold Saucer. I enjoy when games leave space for low-stakes moments, but in Rebirth it feels like the moments of levity far outweigh the moments of tension. Man, this guy's just missing the plot of the game, and he has no understanding of the original game. It's not stretching anything out. Nothing. There was actually, he talked about Remake being better at this. There was actually stretching out done in Remake. The sewer revisit, like that, what the whole with Leslie in the sewers, that wasn't in the original game. So that was actually, you could say, oh, that was added to fill time. I don't know if it was, but it does seem that way. It's definitely, in my opinion, the least enjoyable part of the game. I didn't get any of that feeling in Rebirth. I thought the story was going quick. Look, it's our choice to go do all the Chadley stuff, to do the side quests. You don't have to do any of that. But if you do, you get more lore, you get more information, and you get more things to use in the game. But you don't have to do that. You could do story beat for beat the same as the original FF7 by skipping all that stuff. I wholeheartedly believe that people should play the OG before Remake because holy sh**. I agree. I think if you know what's supposed to happen, what actually happens is more impactful. The narrative is theoretically driven by a stick, Shinra following you, and a carrot, finding Sephiroth, but the former doesn't feel urgent and the latter doesn't feel impactful. Various Shinra members show up as bosses that serve as minor obstacles in your path. Again, it's the same as the original game, but they never pose much of a threat, really, because I've seen a lot of people struggle with those boss fights. Similarly, Sephiroth shows up so often in Cloud's hallucinations that you don't ever really miss his presence. Well, spoiler, I don't think he understands that the majority of the time we see Sephiroth in this game, it's actually Jenova. And that's okay, because you're not supposed to yet. But I don't think I still don't agree with that he shows up so often. I don't think he's really there that much. It's like the boy who cried wolf if he only saw the wolf in his mind. Well, that's building up to when things with Sephiroth actually happen. And yet I don't dislike the game. Every time I load it up, I end up having a pretty good time. Combat is entertaining. The minigames, especially Queen's Blood, are terrific. But yet he hated playing it on the boat. And I enjoy spending time with these characters. It just feels like spending time is all the game really has to offer. It's a road trip where the destination doesn't matter. Man, you're missing it because you almost got it there at the end. You enjoy spending time with these characters. And what does that do? It makes what's going to happen more impactful. If you didn't care about these characters, you're not going to care what's going to happen at the end of Rebirth when you eventually get there. You're not going to care what happens to Tifa and Gongaga. And you're not going to care what happens when we get to part 3. Like, the destination to me is clear. We're chasing Sephiroth. We have to stop Sephiroth. So Meteor doesn't happen. I don't know how that can't be more clear. So to me, I don't think he's paying attention. But I also think, why is he firing this game up now after 11 months and writing this article? Because Final Fantasy VII Rebirth just came out on PC. And so everybody is playing this now. People are Googling stuff about it. And so I got to write an article about Rebirth because people are, I'm trying to get clicks. There's a reason why he didn't do this in December. And there's a reason why he's not doing this next month. And I understand that from like a business point of view. But man, this is what you got out of the game. I wouldn't finish the game if I were you, honestly, if you have this impression from it. Although, I would like to see him proved wrong by the end of the game with what happens. But the way he's experienced and understood the amount of the game that he's played, I don't know if that's possible.